What's up, everybody? Let's spin some yarn. This one is going to be, I don't know, it's going to be based on a vague recollection. I mean, I remember most of what was written, but it was kind of late. I think last night, I fell asleep by accident. It's a boring story, but when I woke up, I checked my phone and I had an alert on Reddit, so I looked at it and then I caught a glimpse of like a title. I don't even remember what sub it was because I go in the submarines one, the military one, the new to the Navy one, the Navy one, and the podcasts one, I think. And it just had a title that I was curious. It was a submarine JO asking for help, kind of venting, but kind of asking for help as well. And I read it, and mind you, I had just woken up. And so I got the gist of it, and I went back looking for it to reference for the podcast, and I can't find it. So I don't know if it got taken down by the person that posted it, or if I just don't recall enough keywords, or I'm Reddit challenge or what. But if as you listen, you recognize the thread, if somebody could shoot me the link, that would be amazing, because I would like to post the link to the podcast in the discussion of this. So what the content of it was basically submarine JOs on a shipyard boat, and the shipyard in and of itself, it seems like, especially for submariners, I don't know. I say that because it's my context. It may be like this for everyone, and from some of the people I've talked to, it seems like the opinion is universal that no one likes being in the shipyard. But I'm assuming we have female officers, so I don't recall if it was specific, but it doesn't matter. The officer, the JO, was basically explaining a really, really bad command culture, toxic leadership. People are run ragged. They're focused on the wrong things, specifically referencing, and this is the chiefs, that they're worried about hands in pockets and I think cleanliness, like CPS, instead of being good at maintenance and just technical expertise, right? And like watch standing and stuff like that. Or he said qualifications. That was the other thing. It was maintenance and qualifications were the things that he thought or she thought should be focused on. And described just basically that, like, working really long hours, no one ever leaves until super late. He described a situation, or she described a situation specifically where they had stood duty the night prior and gotten like no sleep, which happens if there's stuff going on and the duty officer, engineering duty officer, like, are needed for evolutions or whatever, tags, stuff happens. And that he got to go home early, or the officer. I keep janking up the pronouns. I'm sorry. The JO got to go home early after the duty day, and early was like 1500 because he hadn't slept really. And 1500, I mean, in a reasonable shipyard environment, could be considered at least pretty darn close to the end of the workday. And kind of throwing their hands up saying, like, what can I do? And I quickly scanned some of the responses, and I'll probably say a few of the same things, but I want to explore the idea that from different perspectives. Like, perspective is extremely important. The intent of the people that are creating this environment, I think, is extremely important, because many times, I know this is an unpopular opinion, but many times the people that encounter what they believe to be a toxic command climate, and I know this because I've been high enough up in the leadership structure to be able to see what the people creating the climate are talking about, of which I was one of them, and been in the meetings and listened to the triad. And like, I got to be behind the curtain all the time. hearing the planning process, oftentimes vocally disagreeing with a lot of the choices that were made, but one or two voices in the room aren't always going to win the argument. I got to influence it sometimes, and I think by and large, if graded on a curve, my last command was probably slightly above average. I think we did a lot of things well. There was a lot of things we could do better. But based on, especially in my current job where I get to travel around and see a lot of the submarine crews and get like a 2.5 day snapshot of the culture. So it's not an in-depth piece, and everything's packaged for an inspection team because that's what we're doing. And there's another inspection team on board generally when we're there. So, you get a look, and you kind of get to gauge it. And I've found it's actually pretty easy to disarm junior sailors and get them to tell you what they really think. And then also a lot of times I know people on board the submarine that'll give me the unfiltered version. But what I can tell you is the vast majority of the time when sailors perceive there to be a toxic command climate, what they're really experiencing is just poor leadership. And that doesn't mean malicious. That just means not as effective as it can and should be. And I'm a vocal advocate for that. And I think that the two things aren't mutually exclusive in that inept leadership is going to create a very negative command climate, but there generally isn't malice there. And I think that's what gets lost in translation because the sailors are suffering. So how else would they be put in this position unless these people are just heartless morons, right? And I get it. I've been standing in that position on a submarine where I thought they were all just sitting in the chief's mess, stroking their mustaches, laughing at the diabolical plot they were going to hatch next that was going to make our lives hurt even more. Like I've been that third and second class that had those conversations with my buddies, thinking that these guys were the evil empire. But having been where I've been and done what I've done, I now understand that the vast majority of the time, and there are definitely toxic leadership structures out there that should not be doing their job and should never have been trusted to do that job in the first place, and are creating a toxic command climate because they're just not great people. But that's rare. And I've said that a bunch of times before. What I want to focus on is that in a command like this, generally what's happening is there's a whole bunch of people that are in these leadership positions that are genuinely concerned with what's best for the command and mission accomplishment, and have a hard time understanding that what's best for the people overall in every aspect is the same thing. For some reason, in naval leadership development, and that includes our officers, I find this to be especially acute in the submarine service. I don't know if it's the same in other communities, but it's really bad in the submarine community. The officers and senior leadership, as a result, kind of gets pulled in a lot of the times. And other times they're the one that are arguing against it. But at the end of the day, the guy or gal wearing the command at sea pin gets to make the decision. They get focused on mission accomplishment, and they get focused on metrics and efficiencies, and we have to do training and drills and admin reviews and create processes so that all of our programs are working efficiently and effectively, and I can turn my spreadsheet green, and I can check things off on my little task list and report completion to the next higher superior in my chain of command, and they can make their spreadsheets green. And when all the spreadsheets are green, all is well with the world, and we're in a lean, mean fighting machine. Like our mission of efficacy is going to be outstanding. And they lose sight of the people aspect of it, where the only way you're going to be an efficient unit in whatever mission area you're operating in is when the people that comprise that unit and who are responsible for completing that mission, of actually doing all of the tasks that add up to actual mission accomplishment, that they're well taken care of. And that includes training, and it includes having efficient and effective but not onerous administrative processes to make sure that, because pay issues stress people out. Admin issues that can like hold back a promotion or an award or whatever, or some kind of progression or getting a job or whatever, stress people out. But also not getting enough liberty stresses people out. Having issues at home that they don't have time to take care of stresses people out. Stress on a marriage because you're never home, or when you do get home, you're angry and or tired or just disengaged from any family obligations that you have, stresses people out. And so it's a balancing act. There's probably multiple sides, if you want to call it that, but there's two things that I think are opposing one another, in that the people that are in charge of making all the decisions and making the plan and figuring out how the submarine or whatever unit you want to apply this concept to is going to train and equip and man and qualify and do everything that they need to do to accomplish whatever the mission is, even if that mission is completing an availability and getting out of the shipyard with qualified watchstanders and people that are ready to go to sea, which is difficult. They're doing so, the people in charge are doing so in a way where they're doing so almost in a vacuum, where it's not like they're not having conversations with the people that are supposed to be the experts. So like department heads, department chiefs, CMC, XO, all those people are in the room. But a lot of times what gets lost in translation, or not voiced at all by the leadership that feeds those representatives so that they can go into those meetings and then feed the information up to the decision makers, is the people piece of the puzzle, in that we're looking at our sailors like they are a piece of equipment or machinery, and that we just need to do the maintenance of training and do the maintenance of admin and compliance and all the other crap that jam packs the plan of the week to the point that it's choked out. You barely have time for lunch, and you find yourself on the ship every day in shipyard when you have no obligation to go to sea past 1800. And I've been there. Same thing in any kind of other import environment, or even at sea, where sailors are struggling to get sleep because there's all these onerous requirements that a lot of them are superfluous. Like, a lot of them don't have a purpose. They're just a thing that somebody thinks is a good idea, so they cram it in the plan of the week because they think that their superior will like it, or it's going to turn some stupid spreadsheet green. And what you end up with is a JO getting on Reddit and crying out for help, like advice on, like, what can I do as a first tour junior officer to try to rectify some of this? Because what he sees is through a human filter, because God bless this person for not having lost that yet, like that lens through which he's looking at his sailors as human beings that have needs, including himself or herself. And that JO wants to address it. That leader wants to address those needs, but is up against a pretty formidable foe in the bureaucratic nature of how submarines operate, whether it's in the shipyard or in any other environment, where the chain of command thinks that white space is the enemy in a plan of the week, and they have to cram something in there. And if they're not training or drilling or qualifying or doing any possible thing that is supposed to be done in accordance with some book somewhere or some, requirement that they created themselves, that time is being wasted or they're not doing their job or they're not going to be prepared when they get the ship to sea and are charged with the mission of missions vital to national security, blah, blah, blah. So what's weird about it is both entities, so this JO and any sailor that's in this position on the bottom looking up is in the position of concern for the human needs of all of these sailors that are clearly not being met because they have conversations with them all. They can see it. They're feeling it themselves, that they're not getting enough sleep. They're not getting enough time at home. There's no balance. And also that a lot of that time is being wasted for no reason, that they're on the submarine and they don't need to be. They could be at home, but for whatever reason, the evil empire is conspiring to keep them on board and just run them ragged. And so now morale's low, discipline is low, people aren't getting qualified. And a lot of that is I guess that this particular command isn't as focused on that as they apparently should be, but also sailors do a lot of qualifying in what is considered free time. So like during the day, they're doing the normal work of the division or the work center. And then when that's done, then they go work on qualifications, get in the books, go get a checkout, go stand a UI, whatever. Can't do that if you don't have any free time. And if you do get free time, but that free time is after your third or fourth 12-hour, 13-hour, 14-hour day in a row, you're not going to spend it doing quals. You're going to leave. You're going to go home. And you should. So the trouble here is, while I don't think it's the evil empire, I think the chain of command of the submarine probably has good intentions. The loss of focus on human needs is, I feel like, one of the biggest mistakes that leadership triads make, especially on vessels of any kind or just operational units, is that they spend too much time on metrics. And sometimes that can come from a place of, I want to get promoted, so I need to make sure that my spreadsheet's green, because that's how they're judged, which is also a giant problem, because the leaders that are put in that position that do want to advance are going to work towards the metrics that are set for them, right? So like a lot of the stuff you hear about in relation to advancement that sailors complain about is like, well, why do I have to go to college, or why do I have to volunteer? Or you see the bake sale memes and all that stuff. Go read the Chiefs Board precepts, right? Sailors are going to work towards the things you put in front of them. So the precepts say that those things are important. So sailors are going to make those things important if they want to advance. And so when you put command and community involvement in there, when you put specific examples, when you put collateral duties, so you're going to get collateral duty cowboys. You're going to get people are going to work towards the content of those precepts. And then based on those precepts, the boards are going to select to those precepts. So we need to revise the criteria with which we're evaluating and advancing sailors in order to get that to not be the thing that we're working towards. And the same applies here, where the leadership is working towards similar criteria put in place by the next superior in command, so the commodores and then the flag officers, or the CMCs that are at those commands as well, that are judging and evaluating the unit level CMCs, are putting forth criteria by which these people are judged. And if they don't meet those metrics, they don't move forward in their careers, and that can motivate leadership to do some dumb stuff. So those criteria need to be revised. However, leadership is a solution to everything. It's one of my favorite extreme ownership quotes. So it's Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. It's just that you can lead your way out of nearly any problem. I want to say any problem, but like everything, there's no absolutes, or very few in this life. So I'm sure somebody could produce an example where that's not true, but the vast majority of the time it is. So any good leader, any well-prepared and educated leader, with which, obviously I think there's a problem there because I do this podcast and I spend so much time talking about it. But if leaders spend the time to educate themselves on leadership and the best ways to meet human needs, with which this command clearly has a problem, they could do both. There's nothing precluding a submarine from doing both. And here's what I mean by that. So the stuff that, like, the joke on the internet is like verifying your NFAS. The stuff that like it matters, but it's really low on the list of priorities. That kind of stuff doesn't need to be liberty dependent ever. And good commanding officers recognize that they have a lot of leeway when they are the ones making the decision to be late on a requirement or waive a requirement or just change the plan in some way that, hey, we're going to meet this requirement, but we're going to do it in a different way or on a different timeline, or like I mentioned, not do it at all. Or we'll do that when we return to port or whatever. And again, there's a lot of calculus that goes into that as far as like, is this mission critical? Do I not have a choice because the flag officer is basically making it liberty dependent for the, like making it a hey, thou shalt do this by this date thing. So there's always going to be things that need to be considered in that way, but there's a lot of stuff that the commanding officers have control over. So when we would go through the plan of the week at the meetings, all the planning meetings that we would do, ops briefs and all that other stuff, I'd say at least 70% of the content of that plan of the week, we had complete control over. So there's stuff where there are requirements, right? Where like nukes are a really great example of in their, whatever RPMs or EDMs or whatever the hell book, they have a lot of them. There's training requirements, right? They have to do a certain number of hours and they have to do these, they're called like, I think it stands for continuing training exam or something like that. Like it's a CTE exam. So they have to do exams every like week or something. They have a lot of hard and fast requirements. They have, like their timelines for qualifying something or staying proficient or whatever. I mean, these things are like etched in stone. There are very few requirements in nuclear manuals that are subjective or like waiverable or there's any leeway at all, right? So there are things that like that are going to be prioritized, especially by nuclear trained commanding officers, right? We're not going to let somebody go past their, I think they have like the, whatever they say, like the EDM dates or whatever. I don't know. I'm probably butchering this, but I used to know the stuff better when I heard it talked about every day. But, so there's stuff like that. There's requirements for like security drills on ballistic missile submarines, or before you do a maintenance item, you have to do this evolution. Like there's certain things that you're gonna have to do, right? But that's prioritizing those. You prioritize those things on a list, and then you decide what's got to be done now, and what can be done tomorrow, and what can be done a week or a month from now, and what stuff can just drop off the plate until we have bandwidth, right? It's like 2 crew submarines, for example, right? Like we still call it the off crew. What it's really called is a pre-deployment training period, because again, we needed to find another way to shoot ourselves in the foot and steal people's liberty. But the 2 crew submarine concept is one crew has a submarine at sea, the other crew is in port training and getting everything ready and getting provisions and qualifications and training and whatever done, so that when the submarine comes back, we go into like a refit period where we fix anything that's broke, and load the submarine out and get everything ready to go. And then the other crew takes it out. So shorter periods in port, submarine stays out longer because there's another crew waiting to take over, replenish, and get back out there. But you have a 3-ish month period where you don't own the submarine. So if you're a crew of a submarine and you don't even own the submarine, imagine the bandwidth that you should have. However, what generally ends up happening nowadays is a war on white space, where we just find stuff to populate the planet of the day with, and it massacres anybody's ability to get liberty and spend time at home. So what you'll find is people are in this building doing things until 1800 when they don't even have a warship to worry about. There's no maintenance requirements. There's no watch standing. There's no duty. There's no nothing. It's just trainers and planning meetings and stuff like that. And they still find a way to keep, especially khakis. A lot of times the junior enlisted get a pretty good break, but E6 and above, more probably chief and above, they find a way to keep those people busy to the point of ridiculousness. So educating yourself on what's required, and then just prioritizing all of the things that we think we need to do, and then just having a really good filter for how we're going to spread these things out, how we're going to take advantage of opportunities to get the crew liberty, to get the crew quality of life items, to understand that, hey, and I have my prior commanding officer, I have a lot of issues with the way he did things, but I can tell you one thing that he was outstanding at was making sure that when we were in that period where we didn't own the submarine, that the crew got as many, we took a lot of 3 or 4 day weekends. Any opportunity that man had to give the crew a day off, he would do. And he did it on purpose. He was investing in the future so that when we did own the warship, when he had to ask a lot of us, he would say ahead of time, hey, I'm doing this because it's going to be tough when we get the boat back. We got a short schedule. We got a lot to get done, and then we got to take it out and go do God's work. So he knew that the more he invested ahead of time in quality of life items, making sure sailors had time to go do things, blah, 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 that when we got the submarine back, it's yeah, you're refreshed. You feel good. You had a lot of time off, so that when those things are asked of you, it still sucks, right? Like when you have to work really long hours, you don't get to go home. You don't get to sleep. It still sucks, but it's not, you don't see people fray as much. You don't see morale dive as much. You'll see people working hard and suffering together, but laughing about it instead of looking like they want to jump off the side of the submarine. It's a different thing. Unit cohesion is still high, even though, in a lot of those moments, it's it still sucks. It's still hard. It's just a different mentality. Everybody's in a different space, and the unit as a whole, the unit cohesion as a whole, is much, much higher. As far as the specific case of this command and just kind of and I get a lot of these questions about, it's an individual saying, well, what can I do? And a lot of times the answer is not what they want it to be, because a JO on a submarine can't fix this. You can't fix the submarine. You can make your contribution to in a couple of ways. The first one is based on the idea, and I'm not in a position to be a qualified judge of if this chain of command is actually toxic and would not even be willing to entertain a conversation, or if this chain of command is simply ineffective in doing a lot of the things that they need to do to obtain the goal of a great command climate and mission accomplishment. But I imagine this JO has enough insight to do that themselves. So what I'll say is, if it's really truly a toxic leadership structure, I would need more detail to give you any kind of real advice on what your next move could be in order to try to help address the situation, especially if there's really like egregious things happening, like where sailors are like, there's like policy being violated or sailors getting taken advantage of, or like there's like grievance level stuff or IG level stuff that needs to get reported. I didn't get that vibe from the post, but it was just a Reddit post with not as much context as I would need to really know that. What my suspicion is, based on generally this being the case, is that it's probably a leadership structure that's more inept or just kind of missing the mark with their likely good intent. And I say good, like they're trying to accomplish the mission and they want everybody to be well trained and qualified and they want the submarine to do well. They're just not going about accomplishing that in the right way. It is what it is. Like we don't spend time investing in leadership development and education in the way that we need to have effective leaders in these positions. We just don't. And that's a problem. But what I would say is that with that kind of baseline evaluation of this like vague leadership triad that I've kind of painted, because I don't have enough details to know exactly what's going on. What I can tell you is they're probably pretty reasonable human beings that genuinely have the best interests of the crew of the submarine at heart most of the time, and that in certain scenarios may entertain doing some of the things you wish they would do, but you haven't had those types of conversations. And that there are ways to do that. I can tell you that J.O. going and sitting down and talking to either the CMC or in this case the chief of the boat, probably not the worst idea ever. Asking questions about like if you really believe and even better have evidence that qualifications coming out of the shipyard have not been made a priority and as a result the Watchable will suffer, and you don't think the command is paying any attention to that and should be, that's a conversation you go sit down and have with your cobb and say, hey, why is this not a priority? We know we're coming out of the shipyard. We know we're going to have a watchable demand, and we're not going to be able to effectively do that, especially if you have like people that are going to be port and starboard because no one's qualified, blah, blah, blah. Like that's an issue. That's a conversation you can have, and maybe the cobb just has 10 other flaming chainsaws he's juggling and kind of just lost focus on that. I'm slowing down as I say that because I have a hard time believing that that's not at the top of their to-do list, but who knows, like I don't know what's going on. So the point being, sitting down and having a conversation with the person that owns the process that you're concerned with, that's a thing that might be worth doing. Sitting down with your XO, if you think that'll be a productive conversation, or your CO, and just saying, I'd like to have conversations and frame it as you want to be a better leader. You want to be a better officer. Like I see these things happening. I see the sailors stressed out. What can I do? Like, what advice can you give me to be a better division officer, as far as like, how can I better take care of my sailors so that they have more time off and what have you? Framing the conversation that way might be enough to get the ball rolling in that CO or XO's head about, do we have an issue with other people? Like, let me go grab another division officer or maybe a department head, but probably a divo, and go grab them and be like, hey, are you having the same issue? Like, are your sailors like super stressed out? Are you concerned about their ability to like get maintenance done effectively and navigate work controls processes effectively because they're stressed out and tired all the time? They don't get enough liberty? Because like a lot of times you'll see a work controls violation and it has to be because they don't understand the content of the TUMS or whatever. And it's not that. It's that their give a crap level is so low at this point. Their morale is so low that maybe because they said F it, or maybe because they just they weren't engaged and missed something and made a mistake that they otherwise wouldn't have made if they were engaged and motivated and cared and invested in the success of the unit. They wouldn't have made. So it's like, if they see that demand signal from you framed that way, that might be enough to start a conversation. Separately from that, there's some creativity that can go into these things. And what do I mean by that? Well, when I was a chief on my, not this past boat, but the one before that, I mean, I did it on my last boat too, but I had a lot more, shall we say, authority on that submarine. But on the one before that, we had a really just insane schedule. But I saw at my level, there were days that I didn't need my whole division to be on the submarine. There were days in our schedule, like there might be a 1 week block where there wasn't really much going on that my sailors needed to be on board the submarine for. And it was just like sometimes the CS division will get in this routine where it's literally just like show up, make sure lunch goes off without a hitch. As soon as cleanup's done, we're sitting around staring at each other. So what I would do when I knew those days were going to exist is maybe 1 or 2 tops of my sailors, the day before, I would look at that sailor and be like, you have a dental appointment tomorrow. Wink. So you're not going to be here. The vast majority of the time, if a chief says that a sailor's got somewhere they need to be that's not there, then that's not going to be questioned. I hated having to do it quite that way, but that's just the way that it needed to happen at the time to accomplish what I needed to accomplish, to make sure my sailors had the time off to get done what they needed to get done, or just had the break that they needed to just be like, like to decompress or whatever, to get done what they need to get done. Sometimes that involved me going in there and advocating for them to get leave or whatever else, but sometimes it was just that. It was like, if I don't need you here, I don't want you here. I want you to be off doing things you need to do. And I say need purposefully in that you need to spend time with your family. Like, you need to be at home and not on the ship for your sanity, for the health of your relationship with your spouse or kids or whoever, friends, and just have that time away so that you don't go insane. And so that you're engaged and morale's high and you take training and drilling seriously and everything else. So that is a mechanism that exists. If you and your chief sit down and have a conversation, say, the sphere of control that I have is the division that I'm the division officer of. And there are times where I just don't need people here, even if it's like half a day. Like I'd have somebody come in, muster, and be like, all right, it's 9 a.m. Go to your dental appointment and don't come back. Wink, wink. Then that's a thing that you can use to take care of your people, because that's what you have control over. You're not going to be able to save the whole ship. More likely than not, you're not going to be able to fix it for everyone, because you're not the commanding officer. You might be able to plant that seed based on the prior conversation that I mentioned having, but more likely than not, you're going to just have to exercise control over what you can. You're going to have to take care of the sailors you're charged with leading, and that means your division. So you have presumably a division chief. Sit down and have that conversation with them and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. I want to start getting guys out of here when we can. And if that means that he has a conversation with the EDMC and says, hey, I'm going to do this, and then you fly it by Eng and Eng is cool with it, and that's where it stops, cool. You may find yourself having a conversation where the Cobb and XO and everybody else is like, well, yeah, you could have been doing that already. Why aren't you doing that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you might have a conversation where they just assume that being the division officer in chief, you're managing the liberty of your division effectively. You never know. I don't know as far as like you specifically as a junior officer, you probably answer to the Eng or XO. So there might be different demands on your time, might be different demands on chief's time from Cobb and EDMC. But as far as the division itself, I mean, no one ever told me, like there were mandatory events, obviously, but nobody ever told me when to put my division on Liberty. I put them on Liberty when it was time to put them on Liberty. So if I told them, hey, you don't have to be here tomorrow because you're the guy that I'm giving the day off tomorrow, then whatever. They're not here. And I made sure there was no mandatory events. I made sure there wasn't a thing they needed to do. But there's ways in which you can manage that if you're not already doing that, which for some reason a lot of people think that, you know, like the Cobb or EDMC or higher, like that they have some like problem with sailors being on Liberty if their chief and Divo decide that there's nothing for them to do. Like, I own that work center. I own that work list. If there's nothing to do, I'm going to put my sailors on Liberty. So, and there may very well be people like that out there that would have a problem with that, which is why sometimes you need to get creative. I know that sounds, I don't know, maybe you can make the argument that that's slightly unethical, but I'm the one in charge of them and I control their liberty. And if I had a Cobb or an EDMC or an XO or whoever that I knew would have a problem with me putting my sailors on Liberty just by virtue of the fact that they should just be here, but why? And then, well, but just because it's normal working hours, like, okay, no, I'm going to find a way around that. So there's that. And then the last part to consider is, and I hesitate to even mention this because I don't want to pass judgment on people I don't even know. However, many times, shipyard submarines, I don't know if this applies to everybody, but shipyard submarines, especially if you're in the shipyard for a long period of time, when you I kind of vaguely know some of the stuff via just overheard discussions and questions that I've asked. It applies to the CO and XO billeting as well. I think, like, and I'm just going to say it like that because I'm not an expert on it. I'm not 100% sure how that happens, but I think it kind of happens similarly. But I know for a fact that the Cobbs and how they get detailed, when you qualify Cobb, you get graded in tiers, right? And basically what it means is, like, you're qualified to be a Cobb, like you can do the job, but the tier grading, and this is all in the subpers, man, if anybody ever wants to look it up, it basically says tier 1 is like top shelf leadership, needs no supervision, basically like the EP Cobb. Like, this person can go anywhere. This is a leader that you would expect to be able to go into a place like the unit you're describing and start transforming the culture, right? Like, they don't need a lot of support. They're going to go in there and get after it no matter what. And you're going to see a lot of things start getting fixed and squared away. Tier 2 is probably like the MP, right? Like they're good. They can handle it. Go to a just kind of like an average unit and do the thing and probably do well and like might need a little support, but like they're going to be good. Like they're going to get the job done. And do well. And then tier 3 is like your P, maybe, right? They need to go to a unit where they have kind of some support. So maybe like a unit where the chief's mess is really strong, or a unit in the shipyard where they don't have the demands of an operational submarine. So it's a thing to keep in mind. I'm not passing judgment on anyone. I'm sure there are amazing people in those positions that get detailed there, tier 3, that are in the shipyard and they light the world on fire, right? I'm not passing judgment on anyone. However, it's a thing to understand is that it may be a developing leader. Like, you may have people there now that are the ones that needed the support, the ones that still had time to develop, that are figuring it out on the job as you work through that shipyard period. So that's a thing that can figure into the calculus. That's all that is, right? Again, as I'm saying this, I'm like thinking about like buddies of mine hearing it and like Cobbs and stuff and flipping out. But I'm not saying all shipyard Cobbs are bad, right? At all. I might even edit this out because I just don't want to hurt feelings. But, like it's a thing to consider is that in any case, a leader that is detailed to a position is learning things as they do it, right? Most cobs, like there are second tour cobs that have done it before, but most cobs have literally never done this before. So they're figuring it out as they go many times, where they're like, the experience they're getting on the job is them figuring out, oh, that's how you do that thing. Okay, let's look at how that thing unfolded. How could I do this thing better? And takes the lessons learned, goes forward, hopefully does it better next time. So no matter how they're graded out, they're all effectively learning on the job, because of course they are, right? They've never done this before. Like they're qualified. They have a lot of experience to draw on. They've seen great cobs do the job. They've talked to a lot of people. Like there's definitely been a preparation process there, but they've never done the job before. So they're learning. Every leader is, unless you've done it before. And even then you're still learning new lessons because you're dealing with different people, different dynamics, different missions, different whatever. So definitely an important piece to kind of add into the calculus as you add this all up in your head. So, but as far as the JO and what they could do, this is very much you can control what you can control. Some of that is you going and having conversations with people, frame it in a way that is them teaching you what you can do to be a better leader, because I think you'll get a much better result from that. But it can also kind of, by way of inception, plant the idea in the mind of that leader that you had the conversation with that they might have a problem that they weren't focused on or weren't aware of for whatever reason. I'm telling you, you get in some of these positions and sometimes you put blinders on. And that was one of the reasons why I so openly told the people that worked for me that if I'm doing something stupid, I demand you bring it to my attention. And I might tell you, no, I'm doing that on purpose and here's why, and I'll explain it to you. And maybe you don't get to stop doing the thing that you thought was stupid, but at least you have a better idea of why we're doing it. And then a lot of the other times I'd be like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that had that effect, the downstream effect on you. And you're like, it might be a thing that you're just thinking that I'm doing it because I'm a jerk. And in reality, juggling 7,000 flaming chainsaws, I'm gonna miss something. And it's gonna be something that you as the end user might think is super obvious and I should just know. I should just be aware of this. And by virtue of the fact that it's happening this way, I must just be a moron. I must just be a bad leader. Well, turns out I'm just human and I'm juggling 7,000 flaming chainsaws. Because what you see as the end user, as the junior personnel that work for those leaders, is 20% of what I'm responsible for doing. I'm telling you, like, there's so much crap that I have to get done and keep all these chainsaws spinning so that nobody gets injured and nothing really terrible happens, that there is inevitably something I'm going to screw up, right? And it's going to affect you as a junior. So that was something that I would always do, is tell my people, like, hey, bring it to my attention. Tell me when I'm being a moron. Tell me when I've made a bad plan. Tell me when you think like I'll put something out and you're immediately cringing like, oh, that's a terrible plan. Bring that to my attention. And it's either going to end with me going, oh, I didn't realize that. I didn't take that thing into consideration. And then we have a discussion about like, okay, so how can I still accomplish the thing that needs accomplishing, but mitigate that negative effect? Or I'm going to explain something to you that you don't have visibility on. And then you're going to understand why we have to do the thing that we're doing. Either like you're going to understand it better and it's not going to be such a negative thing. You're not going to be so upset about it. Or you're just going to understand, hey, we got to put ourselves through the eye of this needle. And it is what it is. I don't like it either, but we don't have a choice because mission's got to get accomplished. These are the circumstances that have forced us into this situation. And we just got to do this thing that's going to suck. That is another thing that could have come out of that conversation, but absolutely bring it to my attention because, I might just be missing something. And so that you could be shocked by a lot of those conversations, which is why I encourage so many people to have them. And it's nerve wracking. I get it. You feel like you're confronting a leader, or you're challenging them or questioning their abilities. And that's why I say go into it with that idea in your mind and start the conversation off with you're asking for advice, or you're asking for them to walk you through what you can do better as a leader in order to take care of this problem that you see that you're so concerned about, which is, people aren't getting enough rest and time off, and we aren't focused on the right things like qualifications. So you could frame like the qualifications conversation on like my watch, but like my guys aren't getting qualified fast enough. And I view the problem to be these things, but like, what do I do about this? How do I get my people qualified? How do I get the focus to be on qualifications so that, the engineer's blocking off an hour every other day or whatever, I don't know, like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, there's like Eng Qual hour where interviews get done so that people can get qualified and our watch bill can have much better support or whatever. But go into it with that humble approach and perspective, and just go in there and tell them like, hey, I'm a developing leader. I see this problem and I really want to fix it, but I don't know what to do. I don't know how I can balance that and get my sailors time off, but also make sure that all the maintenance is getting done or all the qualifications are happening or whatever. And leverage every other mechanism that you have, including sitting down, talking to your chief and figuring out ways to get people time off, or figuring out ways to let people leave early or come in late, or there were times where like I used to take some duty days for people on their birthdays. Just whatever you can possibly do to improve morale there, get creative. I talk about drink runs a lot. When we're in a really crap situation, everybody's stressed out, show up with a bag of everybody's favorite energy drink. Whatever it is, there's something you can do in the leadership position that you're in. And I do encourage you to involve your chief if it's somebody that you think will add to the positivity and productivity of this process. You can exercise a lot of control over the quality of life of your juniors. As far as for you, that's going to be you having conversations with engineer, XO, those types of people, Cobb, EDMC, depending on whose kind of purview the concern falls under, and going into it with that type of an attitude, and maybe also either bringing a friend or encouraging other JOs to do that as well. And I wouldn't doubt that your department heads have some of the same concerns and are stressed out in a lot of the same way as far as time off and everything else. So having those conversations, and you might be able to plant that seed where they start to think they have a problem that they're not addressing, or they're surprised by a concern you bring to them, and they're like, they go start looking at it and then go down the road of fixing some of those things. But if, again, like I mentioned at the beginning, if anybody has a line on that post or that user, I'd really love to talk to them. Or if the user happens to be listening, hit me up. Love to talk to you in detail about it and try to maybe, I know this was kind of, I talked a lot longer than I probably would have because I felt like I had to capture a lot of what ifs, but because it was vague, and then I couldn't find the post to reference it even. So if anybody has a post, send me the link. If anybody knows the user, or the user themselves is listening off of Reddit that posted that, hit me up. Don't give up the ship podcast at gmail.com. You can Facebook message us, Don't Go With The Ship Podcast, or you can DM me on Instagram or Reddit. You can private message me there at dgutspodcast, or just dgutspodcast on Reddit. Really would love to provide as much insight as I can, and if I can tailor the advice to more detail, like I'll ask a bunch of questions privately that I know you don't want to put out too much detail on Reddit. I get that. We can try to like dial it in a bit. But if anybody has any questions about any of this, or comments or stories or whatever, again, don't be afraid to reach out. I'd love to discuss it with you. If you want to support us, dgutspodcast.com/shop. Stickers, pins, all kinds of other stuff, t-shirts, still stuff like that. You can order that. It's not for profit. It's just, it helps us pay the bills. All the PayPal account the payment goes to is the PayPal account all the bills come out of. So like I promise you, it's not for profit. All the money goes back into paying the subscription fees and stuff like that for the podcast and the website and the RSS feed and all that stuff. And then if you would be so kind to help get the word out, like, share, subscribe, review on all the platforms for podcasts and social media and all the things. It just helps get the podcast stuff in front of the people that need it. And that is it. That's what I got for you today. Thank you so much for listening, and don't give up the ship.